Councillors, committee members, it's 1 o'clock, so let's get going. So just confirming everybody that this meeting is being live streamed, and a reminder in terms of mobile phones. We'll just see how we're going, whether or not we need to take a break. Scheduled for 3 p.m, but if we need it, I'll just check in with the meeting in that respect. So can we move to item 1 in terms of the opening karakia, and can I invite Councillor Wang, who is online with us, to open the meeting for us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tutau mai runga, tutau mai raro, tutau mai roto, tutau mai waho. Kia tau ai, te mauri tu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, aiki.
Okay, so item 2 in terms of calling for apologies. So I have an apology for Councillor Waru for lateness. I don't think there are any other apologies. We're complete, so I ask for a mover and a seconder that the apologies be accepted. Councillor Barker moved, seconded by Mayor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, we'll take that as confirmed. Declarations of interest, so that's in our agenda. It's sitting on Stella. Are there any items to add or amend to the declarations of interest? I'm seeing that there are none. And in terms of urgent items on the agenda, I'm not advised of any. I'll just note that in terms of, we have Audit who will join the meeting. We have their audit management letter on the agenda. Late last night, the team received the audit plan for the coming audit this year. So whilst it's not on the agenda, at that time when auditors talking, I'll just get them to briefly talk about the audit plan, and we'll see that in more detail at our next meeting. But just while we've got the auditors, it seems appropriate to take use of their time. Moving to item 5, which is the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. So can I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on 14 November 2024 be confirmed as a true and correct record? Moved by Councillor Kai Fong, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. They'll take those confirmed. Are there any comments or points of clarification on the minutes? Councillor Barker.
Just note on page 11 that the Deputy Chair requested that we have things be included in the future reporting, including credit rating, direction of travel, and a couple of other items. Is that going to be...
So Councillor, we will have the Treasury report later in the agenda, so I'll just kind of check in at that point in time, and I think pretty much that they have been included, but we'll pick that up when we'll get to that item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so there's item 6, there are no specific presentations, so we can move to item 7, which is on page 14. So can I have a mover and a seconder that the report, Audit and Risk Committee Work Programme be received? So that is moved by Mayor Tapsell, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. We'll take that as confirmed. So Greg, this is really just recording the work programme, just in terms of an overview of that, and we'll discuss probably more when we get to the action list in terms of items that will affect it in the future, but over to you. Yep.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Really this is just highlighting what is coming up and what is being reported on today. I think probably more discussion to be had in the actions register following this, and those will then pull up into the work plan going forward.
Cool, no, thank you, Greg. And I note the legislative compliance item is ticked as a green. It's not on our agenda today, but we'll pick that up in terms of going forward. Yep, okay, cool, thank you. If there are no other questions on the audit plan, let's move to item 7.2 on page 16. And can I have a mover and a seconder that the report, Audit and Risk Committee Action Register be received? Moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Councillor Kai Fong. All those in favour, please say aye. Take that as confirmed, thank you. Greg, we're in your hands to take us through the report, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'll read through each action and a comment next to that, and then I'm happy to take your direction.
Thank you.
For that. So, just starting up at the top, so the A&R Draft Work Programme, investigate developing and funding an internal audit programme that currently has a status of Chair to raise with councillors.
So I think I've consistently raised that at every meeting. I understand at this point in time the draft annual plan does not make any provision for any internal audit. I mean, as part of the terms of reference for this committee, and I think I've been quite consistent with my views at an organisation this size, complexity type of projects. I would expect it to have an internal audit program, and I know fellow independent members of a similar view. So I'd make a strong request that Council, through its annual plan discussions, I know the draft's probably already locked down, but there is a time for CE submission, that you seriously consider making provision for internal audit. It provides a key plank in terms of stewardship, in terms of the organisation's assets and processes, along with, in terms of fraud risk management, in terms of a deterrent, and I think it would be good practice for an organisation this size. So that's sort of my view, and I'd just really be interested in any other observations or comments with respect to that. Tapsall.
Sorry, just regarding the interim audit, and I may not have a complete understanding of what that is, but is there additional costs to that? Because one of the key things that this council has been looking at is reducing costs as much as possible, which has included some quite tough decisions. So I would just be quite reserved in terms of the benefit of an interim audit compared to the cost of it, but happy to seek further information on that.
So just to respond to that, so it's internal audit as opposed to external, which is run by Audit New Zealand. So this would be an independent, either external firm, or some organisations have staff doing it, actually undertaking reviews of procedures, checking internal controls, looking at efficiency and effectiveness. So yes, there is a cost to it, but my suggestion to Council is you cannot afford not to do it. I understand looking at cost and cost control, but I think in terms of an organisation this size, given the size of its assets, the type of projects running, the complexity, it'd be a key part of the stewardship. So that's how I just want to. I know, Stuart, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I know it's the tough thing is what can we afford when we can't. Already councils in this country are running deficits now, and they weren't 8 years ago. And cost of governance is, along with everything else, is a cost. The thing with internal audit is that there is a global internal audit standard, and that is certainly for public benefit organisations of this organisation's size. And we have, on the evolution scale, we're at 0. And it's there to help other processes. And a good internal audit process will also help with streamlining and impacts around external audit processes. It's also a way that you can focus on the materiality of things that are impeding council's transparency in other areas. So when I say it's a necessary evil, it's a necessary support pillar. And what Mike has asked for, actually, what we're really saying here is, you set a budget, but it's not necessarily that is going to be a straight cost to your expenditure line, because there may well be benefits from that internal audit process that steam through into other areas that are costing this organisation a lot. But we've really got to have a starting point, I'm sorry, folks. And Mike and I, we're pretty disappointed not to see a budget element for internal audit.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. I know we've got David Walker, our external audit. I think David's online. In terms of the pre-audit questionnaire that goes out, like I have to complete, I'm not sure who else completes it. One of the questions external audit does ask is what internal audit work has been undertaken during the year. So David, are you on the line? And I'd just be interested in your observations with respect to the value internal audit can provide from a governance, stewardship, fraud deterrence, etc., etc. So yeah, David, are you happy to make a comment?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, that's good. I'll try not to shout. I'm struggling to hear you, so I'm sort of kind of like leaning into the screen to actually hear. Oh God, what's happened now? I seem to be massive on the screen.
It's okay. It's okay.
That wasn't intended. Anyway, to answer your question, the internal audit function is definitely an arrow in the quiver. It's a tool that can be used by any entity. The bigger the entity, the more risky the entity, the more likely they are to have an internal audit function. So one would normally associate size with risk. You can have a very small entity which has a massive asset, and that doesn't really, it might have minimal risk. So my emphasis generally is a risk component. For Rotorua, I would have suggested that there is sufficient risk within council that it would be worthwhile considering an internal audit function. So what sort of risks am I talking about? Have a look at the media. There's quite a lot of questions over the Tarawera sewage scheme. There's any number of other things. The Green Lake, there's issues in the media about that. So the question there is what was done in the beginning, what do the budgets look like, what do the approvals look like. So that's just a tiny little drop in the ocean. It can cover sensitive expenditure, wherever those risks lie, and they can vary. They can vary incredibly from organisation to organisation, and even same organisation from year to year. The other aspect is cost versus benefit, and quite often it's a cost, it's a cost, it's a cost. The question is, what's the benefit? Sometimes the benefit can be very, very clear because, for example, if a fraud is found, if there's clear savings, then it's clearly, you can quantify the benefit. But very often, the fact that the work's been done, it acts as a deterrent, the improving of controls. How do you dollar quantify an efficiency gain or an improvement in controls? And I think some of that can be captured by the scoping of the work that gets done. So I would have said that within the internal audit framework, one would be clearly saying, and that could be internal, that could be the Audit and Risk Committee decision, it could be Audit and Risk Committee discussions with council or management, but get to, these are our riskiest areas. This is how we're going to prioritise them, and then go through that scoping exercise so that you know when you get your answer, you've achieved specific either goals or you've certainly addressed the scope of the engagement. The internal audit can be structured in several different ways. You have the internal audit function. On the one extreme, you can have it completely internally resourced. You employ somebody who's your internal auditor, and that can be one in many people. You can have nobody employed, and you can purely get external firms, contractors to perform that function, and you could do it on a modular basis. You could, so for example, you could get an external person to come in and do a sensitive expenditure review, and then you might have nothing for 3 or 4 months because nothing comes up, nothing's important, you're on top of all your risks. Whereas if there's several things going, changing of system, changing of controls, you might find you need to scale up the number of projects, internal audit projects that are being done. So I think the benefit of there's no doubt in my mind, and it's supported by publications that OAG's put out before. There's no doubt in my mind that it does offer a benefit to an entity. There's also no doubt in my mind that the benefit the entity gains is almost entirely dependent on the scoping of the exercise and how it's monitored and how you use the internal audit. If internal audit is left to get on with its own, you won't. I'll take a bet. You won't get the benefit you'd like to get out of it. Chair, Mike, I was struggling to hear some of the conversation. I've picked on what I think are the key points. Is there a specific question you'd like me to further address?
No, not at the moment, David, unless there's questions that arise from what you've covered. But I know the CE would like to make a comment. Can you hear me, David?
I can. I'm sort of listening quite carefully there.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, just to provide my views into that discussion. Firstly, to Deputy Chair's point around balanced budgets, I just want to be clear that whilst some councils do run deficits, we're running a balanced budget, and Audit New Zealand have audited us and provided that certainty. Just want to be clear about that. And secondly, I want to distinguish between having an internal audit function and risk management. So we do plenty of risk management as it is, and I think what you're talking about, Mr. Chair, is having an independent internal audit function that augments the risk management that we already do. So I just want to be clear that there's plenty of risk and there's plenty of frameworks and support in place within the organisation to manage that as it is, but totally aside from any idea to add another internal audit function.
That's right. So the internal audit provides assurance that the risk management practices are effective, that the internal controls are effective, that key policies like procurement, et cetera, are all being complied with. And when I talk about a function, I don't necessarily mean it has to be an in-house person. The model that I've been previously used to is that it was contracted out. So there's different ways of cutting the cake in that respect. So good conversation. Deputy Mayor?
Chair?
Sorry, David, I've just got a question. Can you hold fire, David? I'll just come back to you in a minute, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, given we're talking what the CE just mentioned around we've got good risk management processes in place, and we are doing better processes around our capital delivery, our governance, oversight groups and things like that. Given the current work program, is there not an opportunity to look at the work program of what this committee does? If we're saying that we need an internal audit function, should we be repurposing part of this committee's role to then look at some of those aspects? And my second part of the question is just around costs, because part of our, I know you've mentioned that we don't have a budget line set aside, but we also don't have a program of work set aside, so it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. And also my last point is just around local waters done well. Once that comes into effect, we are going to be ring fencing a significant portion of revenue, capital works programs and debt. So then how does that fit with this? So I'm just wondering if there needs to be a little bit more work done before we, because I see in our program that we've just signed off, we are referring to certain things that we're wanting to do a little bit more of a delve into. So maybe we need a bit more of a discussion at this committee level to better understand what we're proposing with the budget, what sort of work we're going to do, and what can be dealt with internally or is being done or could be done with better processes, and what then needs to be looked at externally.
So if I could just respond to that. So the value internal audit would bring would be an independent assessment that we do have good risk management processes, that our key procurement policies, et cetera, are being complied with. So it'll provide that assurance to governance that the systems are in place and are being adhered to. And I think the other value that internal audit brings is in an organisation a fraud risk deterrent factor, that there is internal audit, that there are independent assessments coming in and looking at things. So that's the two things that I see value. Yes, we would, that the work program I would envisage would need to be signed off by this committee. But I guess unless we have resource to undertake it and it's built into your budgets, then there's no point in talking about a work program. So that's, I guess, the challenge I'll just put to council. And I certainly understand the challenge you've got in terms of fiscal responsibilities and budgets, etc., etc. Anyway, that's my response to you. Hopefully I've answered your questions. Yeah.
What then sort of budget were you anticipating, so that we have some better idea of what we're...
I mean, that's maybe a chat I'd need to have offline with the chair, with the CE, but, you know, a $50,000 budget would be a starting point if you're contracting out to, have a couple of internal audit reviews in specific risk areas a year. So I've just plucked that number off the top of my head at the moment, so we'd need to have more discussion around that. But until we've got resource allocated, then we can't develop a work program, we can't look at areas.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you. I'm just interested to listen to this conversation and hear David's feedback as well. I can see there is some benefits to be found in amongst all of this with regards to not only deterring fraud and managing risk, but also perhaps to streamline our organisation more potentially, and maybe even find more efficiencies. I don't know what you require from us today as a committee, but I would welcome your submission to the annual plan if that's all that's required today.
It did cross my mind. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to submit to the annual plan. I guess I wanted to, it has been on our action list, and I knew you were through the annual plan process, just wanted to really put it top of mind. So whatever the right process for council to consider that, I'll leave that in the hands of the CE to sort out. I think, David, I cut you off before. Apologies. Is there anything you wanted to add briefly? I mean, we've had quite a good discussion on this, so I think everybody's aware of the issue, and I think I've got Councillor Brown. But David, is there something you briefly want to comment on?
Yes, Mike. I wanted to reiterate your comment, which was the assurance that an internal audit function brings to the process. Andrew, you mentioned that you've got a good risk committee, risk management processes, you've got good controls, but the question is, are they working as they're meant to be working? What opportunities of override are there? And one of the key risks we always have in any entity is management override. So the important thing is that independent, yes, independent, but they're still taking instruction from the Audit and Risk Committee, but that independent assessment of, are those risk management processes, are those controls working as you intended them to? That was the first point I wanted to share. The other point was quite often some of the specialised or larger firms outside of they have tools like ACL, they have analytical tools, so they can, for example, take a whole bunch of data and identify transactions that are of higher risk and require additional checking, follow-up, have they breached, and they can set the parameters. And by doing that, they're able to look at several months, a whole year's worth of transactions, which just practically, manually, is very, very difficult. So that is also a factor you might want to consider. If there's a large chunk of detail that could be dealt with electronically, could be a big advantage.
Yeah,
Thanks,
okay.
Mike. Those are the two additional comments I wanted to make.
Thanks, David. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Good discussion. And this is something I raised with Councillor Barker before I'd read the reports, that this is something I wanted to follow up with. So I'm glad to see it's one of the first items on the agenda for discussion. I certainly support where you're coming from. We've heard from the 3 audit experts in the room, so to speak, that that's a strong recommendation. I think as governors we would be remiss in not listening to that, and I would like to see us progress it. And if appropriate, I'm happy to move something along those lines. And I would just, to my fellow councillors, ask ourselves to recall the fact that it took us a little while to stand up the Audit and Risk Committee in our triennium, and there was a gap there that I thought was just not appropriate not to have audit and risk in place. So I would see an internal audit person or people, contracted or otherwise, in those positions covering some of that risk in interim periods would be a smart idea at the very least. I also see it as an investment. As the CEO has expressed, we're doing that risk management work anyway. We've got an audit going. We respond to audits and auditors. It's perhaps just a survey of the landscape of how we employ our risk management people, and maybe we can stand an audit and risk person up without much expense. So just to reiterate, I'm happy to move, if that's appropriate, something along the lines that maybe the CEO and Chair and others explore the option and bring something back at the next committee meeting.
So just checking with the CEO, is that appropriate, just as a motion that the CEO investigates this and reports back to Council? Yeah. Yep. So Councillor Brown.
If that's appropriate.
Would you take that as an action point in terms of, and I'm getting nods around the table with respect to that? No?
Well, I would like to see something actually happen to support what you're asking for.
T?
Look, thank you, Chair. I might need to just have an offline discussion with the team about how we bring this in, because I believe your comments are around funding for the annual plan. So there's a process and train for that, and that's all Council, and Council can then make a decision whether to allocate those funds or not. But I can take direction from this discussion to find an avenue to bring that to Council for consideration. And I would say, before we anchor on the figure you suggested, there are numerous costs associated with audits, including on staff time, that we need to allow for. So, well, we've talked about the benefits, we need to talk about all of the costs as well.
Sure, sure. Okay, so let's pick that up as an action item. Tatsu.
Thank you. I was taking down some notes because I've heard a lot of buzzwords, but I'm not quite sure that we're really addressing the issue that you want to. And I'm also a little worried that there's not a strong understanding of what this organisation actually does, and also the significant change that we've put in place in the past 2.5 years of this council. So yes, it did take some time to get the Audit and Risk Committee up. That certainly was no fault of ours. We tried as hard as possible, and we have made significant changes internally. So while it's good that we have this Audit and Risk Committee going, even what we focus on and what we do now is significantly different to what we used to. Before, the sole focus of this ended up being on code of conducts, and I'm very pleased to say we haven't had a single one in this term. But what I would like us to focus on is very carefully considering the cost, because I had asked the previous Chief Executive when we first came into this term about an internal review, and the cost that came back was this is going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so I just would like to test that, because if you are going out to external providers, and you've seen a massive change in even government agencies that have reined back their consultant spending, because you don't always see a benefit from it. So while I am very open-minded to targeting areas that we do know are high risk, or we want to ensure that key policies like procurement, as has been mentioned, are compliant, I am also mindful that we already do have many systems in place that I think, as part of the Chief Executive coming back, I would like that to be explained, such as the procurement policy is not just one person signing it off. There's a panel, there's a criteria, and even things like we do try as much as possible to emphasise things like being local first. So certainly open-minded to this, but just I remain very cautious on the actual cost, because even if it is $50,000, when you have people in the community complain about trees not being cut or lawns not being mowed or the phone's not getting picked up in time, that $50,000 could go towards another staff member. So we count every single dollar, and I just want to make sure that we are targeting something that is Rotorua Council specific, that our community will see benefits, because while I appreciate the experience and the advice that you're giving us for this, it does appear that theoretically that's best practice for wider councils. We know that every single community in New Zealand is different, and the Rotorua Council is different from other councils too. So I would like to give our staff the opportunity through a report back from the Chief Executive to be able to further explain just how much change we have already put in to ensure that we are delivering not only in an appropriate and compliant way, but in a way that is driving excellent customer service, which I know our new Chief Executive is very strong about.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any, we've had quite a good discussion on this topic. If there's no further discussion, Greg will pick it up as an action item. And so let's carry on through the action list then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Point number 2 was ask that the delegations policy be moved forward from March 2024 to November 2024. Sorry, the typo, supported by the Mayor, to be discussed with the Deputy Mayor following the meeting. And this has not yet been brought forward, but it is on our work programme.
It's on the work programme. Thank you.
One council report requested the post-implementation report specifically look at the benefits realisation, actual benefits versus planned benefits. This is an ongoing action to be actioned once implementation is completed.
So Greg, that'll appear on the work programme at some stage, or is that a question of the CE?
I think that's on the work programme already, but we've got a line for it, but it has
Okay.
we're still going to work through that from a timing perspective.
Sure.
The next point, so key project risk overview report. Chair requested that deep dives into specific projects should include a high-level assessment and provide context for the level of risk, increasing or reducing, and changes. And this is an ongoing action. Councillor Kai Fong asked for more regular reporting on the museum project to Infrastructure and Environment Committee, and that is a completed action.
So we can take that off this action list now. So that reporting's coming through to the separate committee. So there's. Thank you.
The next action is the 2023 annual report and audit.
It's with us now today. Yep.
The actions register, the Chair requested that a review of the committee's terms of reference be added to the work programme and clarify what policies the committee is responsible for. This is currently sitting in as added to the agenda in August 2025.
Yep.
Actions register, the Chair requested that the procurement policy, page 4, heading application subsection F, be updated to include the addition with a requirement to subsequently report the CEO decision and reasons for to Council at the earliest opportunity. We have this noted as ongoing, but this has been completed.
Yes, so we can cross that off now. Thank you. Yep.
Quarterly Treasury reporting to be brought to the committee. This is an ongoing
So we can
action.
take that off the list, so we've got that in train. Thank you.
Okay. Enterprise risk report, project management framework to be brought to the next committee meeting. We've got this as completed. Is this an option paper brought to this?
So I don't think that's fully completed, but let's discuss that when we get to the enterprise risk management report later in the agenda. Yep.
Draft audit New Zealand management letter 2022-23 annual report. Staff to confirm that the audit item for ozone is a legacy item, and I can confirm through our CFO that that is correct. That is a legacy item.
So we can take that as completed. That's no longer required.
Sorry, David.
Can that ozone item, sorry guys, can that ozone item be crossed off the list and resolved?
Through the Chair, yes it can.
Thank you.
The next action is the proposed risk appetite settings, options paper to be brought to the next committee meeting. We've got that notice completed to be brought to this meeting.
I'm not sure that's on the agenda, so let's look at that to the work program. Yep.
And then lastly, the Treasury reporting, committee workshop to be scheduled for deep dive into Treasury reporting, and I will work with the CFO and the Deputy Chair of this committee to see how that works.
Thanks, Greg. Are there any questions for Greg on any items that we've subsequently covered? If not, no, thank you. Okay, if not, we can move to item 7.3. So that's the enterprise risk management report. So that was separately distributed. Is it some Stella? Thank you. The CE suggested that we move the agenda around and we go to the audit management letter 7.3. So since we've got David here, so That's the case. 7.3, so it's on page 20. So can I have a mover and a seconder that the report, Audit New Zealand Management Letter 2023/24, annual report be received? Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, we'll take that as confirmed. So hand over to you, David, to introduce, and then I'll invite David Walker to talk to his report as well.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. So this particular report covers the audit of Council's annual report dated 30 June 2024. It outlays, the audit's perspective of how that process went and how Council has progressed through a number of the recommendations. But I'm happy to pass to David Walker, who will cover the content of that report.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Chair. I'll take the report as read. The 24Js has been gone for a little while now. I think everybody's focus has turned to the 25J. With regards to the summary up front, really addresses the key items. There was a prior error, which was a deferred tax error, which was quite a complicated error all around the revaluation of the airport and accounting for it at the group level. So there's not an error in the parent council, but in the group financial statements. I did talk briefly about it at the council meeting when the 24J was adopted. The other item was the mountain bike track. There was about 11.6 million which was raised into revenue and noted as an asset. When we looked at it in more detail, council didn't really have the control of it. It is a commercial, it's a working forest. The elements which have been, I say given, I don't really mean given as in its entirety, but the areas that council is responsible for example, public access to areas of the park, management of areas of the park, but the ultimate control remains with the iwi and the forest operation. As such, we don't have control, and therefore we weren't able to assume the vested asset and, of course, the related revenue. So that was taken out of the accounts. It wasn't in your budget anyway, so the net effect, if you looked at the mountain bike track, would have been zero. Those really were the key items. As I said, I'd probably take it as read. David J., you may have better sound and what have you, so if there are questions, I'm very happy for you to have a first answer, but otherwise, I'm happy to answer. It is, I think because of the size of the room, I'm not hearing, and I did exchange Teams messages with Warren, and Warren is experiencing the same, so it's not just my my laptop. Mike, I think that's about that's the key things, unless there's specific questions anyone would like me to answer.
No, thanks, David. And if there are questions, I'll shout them out to make sure you do hear them. But can I just firstly draw the committee's attention to 2.4, talking about the quality and timeliness of the audit, where the auditor basically commending council for the preparedness, availability of documents, and our staff responded to questions and a really smooth and efficient audit process. In the comment, there were significant improvements made during the 23-24 financial year. So David and Michelle and to your wider team, you need to be congratulated for that. I know the previous two annual reports and audit were really challenging, but clearly you've significantly lifted the bar. So well done, and thank you for that. Audit have identified the two sort of major points, and I think we understand those, and those were spoken to when the annual report was adopted. And there are a number of recommendations in the report. David and his team have responded to those, and I get a sense that plans are underway to address those. But David J., is there anything in the report specifically you wanted to talk to? And I guess sort of just looking for confirmation that you're confident/comfortable that the various matters that have been raised, that steps and processes are in place as to sort of address those, and we're in reasonably good shape for the 2025 audit.
Sure. So through the Chair, you'll notice that under each recommendation, Council has a response as to how we are progressing to action that recommendation. A number of those bits of work are underway, and the lion's share will be addressed through the 2025 annual report. A number of those probably will, we are in a pattern of continuous improvement. Some longer processes may take a little longer than one annual report to embed, but we are committed to the process of implementing those recommendations.
Cool. No, thanks, David. Are there any questions from the committee? Stuart?
Yeah, just one. David, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, Stuart.
Great. David, it was great. I'd just like to say it was a great report, especially after previous years. It was just really good to see such a major improvement in everything, and the fact that you were one of probably it wasn't not all councils adopted in time, and you guys did. It was pretty phenomenal effort. David, are there any new or previous recommendations that you've articulated in this report that you would consider that if not remedied, they might materially contribute to congestion in the 25 audit process? i.e., could they, if they're not dealt with, just recycle issues that might be create significant delays to the 25 audit?
Well, that's a curveball, Stuart. I will, to some extent, dodge your question, but equally answer it. And the key thing to me, and I completely David J. and Michelle, I apologise. The first thing I should have said was well done to you guys, and I know I said that in the council meeting.
You did.
And Stuart, I think the preparation for the audit is absolutely fundamental. Time and time and time again, we have delays in finalising entities, not just councils, annual reports, because of the delays in getting the final accounts, getting the information, and even detailed information, sample supporting documentation, for example. So to me, addressed in the report, the most important thing is preparation and being ready for the audit team when they go in. Very, very, very closely aligned to that, and where David and Michelle were really fantastic in 24J is the response. You want us in and out. My wife's also an accountant, and she has auditors, and she says, I don't know how I like you because you're an auditor. She can't stand the auditors. All she wants is them in and out. And because she wants them in and out, she gives them exactly what they want as soon as she possibly can. And in that way, what David J. and Michelle did was they gave us the information. Gregor's another name, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people as well. I know we had great meetings with people in the various transport and other divisions. So my second element would be that response time, accurate, complete information. If you don't know, clear it and get it to us. The next point I'd like to raise, Stuart, in answering your question is around property, plant and equipment. You're doing a couple of valuations this year. There's land, there's buildings, artworks. Artworks in the carrying value of artworks at the moment is about 20 million. Buildings and land are big ones. Buildings always take a lot more time because we've got to get into, valuation rates. And David J has already been proactive. He's organised, and David, you might be supported by other people, and I certainly, well done to them as well. Brought forward the valuations to the end of March. Hopefully that will allow us to, sort of get access to the reports and start the valuations work early. Why do I pick on that? Because it's a very chunky section. It's fraught with pitfalls and technical issues that can arise. So much better to put that on the brought forward list and get it done as soon as possible. There is the gap between the 31st of March and the end of June. There will be a little bit of work which needs to be done to cover off those 3 months. That's absolutely normal in terms of standards. I'll have a more detailed conversation with David and Michelle. But the benefit of bringing those valuations early, I think, will certainly support the timely process that we've talked about for Rotorua's 25 JIT. Those, Stuart, would be my top bucket items.
Thanks very much for that.
So if there's no other questions, and I guess you've already segued into it, like one of the things I mentioned at the start of the meeting was a brief discussion around preparedness and planning for the 25 audit. The annual the audit plan document only arrived last night, so it's not on our agenda, but I just wanted to check in both with David Walker and David J that planning is well underway. We've got a timetable project plan, so we're feeling in a good space with respect to whilst it's only 3 months away, it's not many sleeps before you're into it again. So I'm getting nods from David J, but just can you maybe comment to that in terms of where we're at, please?
So through the chair, we have an annual plan, an annual report plan that the team are working through. As David Walker alluded, we have brought forward our valuation date for the senior report being 31 March. So our valuers Becker for land and buildings and the valuer for the art collection are already underway. We are already undertaking that valuation work. We have work scheduled for the remainder of the month through June, and we will be ready when audit turn up after 31 June.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And we've got, in terms of the program timeline of when audit's on site, post 30 June, that's all scheduled in, and we've got confirmation of that from audit resourcing. That's probably more a question for David Walker in terms of that audit has the resourcing to meet the proposed annual report timeline, and so that we will adopt by 30 October?
Yeah, we're resourced. It's the period in which we've resourced is, council time.
Yep.
So basically all Audit New Zealand's resources are focused on councils.
Yep.
We plan that there's the audit plan, which I appreciate, and as Mike said, I only sent it through last night. There is a timetable in there. We've got the adoption date, expected adoption date for the 29th of October. That can change if I'm told early. We've still got a little bit of flexibility, but in the audit plan at the moment, we've got the adoption date as the 29th of October. And so, Chair, that's a long answer to your question, but yes, we have got resources.
Okay, no, thank you, David. Are there any other questions whilst we've got the auditors with us? Since you're not, okay. David and Warren, thank you very much for joining us. You're welcome to stay on if you wish to observe the rest of the meeting. And David and Michelle, thanks also to you both. Thank you.
Chair?
Yes?
Just before you move on to the next topic, one of the reasons this audit plan is not with you is because there were some changes from Central. Central is running along with the OAG an integrity survey, and there were some changes which were made in the original audit plan. There was commentary about a survey being done, an integrity survey. Because I didn't have a date from Central, I took it out of the audit plan, and that's what you've got. It's out. This morning, I did send an email to Andrew and Mike. From memory, I copied you in as well, because the survey is being seen as part of the 25J audit, and it will include some reporting. So I just wanted to mention that it's not in the audit plan because of this timing issue.
Okay.
And so I don't propose to go and edit it because that Andrew and Mike you've got covers everything. So it's, in my mind, it's sort of pointless changing the audit plan. But thank you for allowing me just to comment on that.
Okay, thanks David. Thank you. Okay, folks, let's go back to 7.3, which is the, excuse me, the Enterprise Risk Management Report. So noting it's on our Stellar, it's on a separate place. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the report, Enterprise Risk Management Report, March 25, be received? Moved by Mayor Tapsell, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, thank you. We'll take it as read. And so invite Thomas. I think Elrond is unwell today, so Thomas is going to present that for us. Yep.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors and Deputy Chair. Unfortunately, Elrond is sick, so I will endeavour to take you through his presentation, just acknowledging that I don't have the level of detail that Elrond does, and I'll try my best. One of the things Elrond has been working on with the two independent members has just been looking at our enterprise risk and having a bit of a reset. So what we have done on this page is we've aligned the platform to take into account our new operational groups. We've also taken into account the addition of the ex-Infracore coming in as well. And what we've currently got underway is all the group managers are currently going through a process of reviewing their risk registers and resetting those as appropriate. And we're anticipating probably quite a bit of change potentially at the next reporting with regards to some risks dropping off and new ones coming on board. And we'll also be working with the individual GMs to present those to you. The next one is the new format that we're working towards or actually have in place. And so in particular it's a little bit hard to read, but in the bottom there are those list categories with regards to what they are, what their raw risks are, and what the mitigated risks ultimately are afterwards, and then what mitigations are. And there is an expectation that those are to be divvied up, if I was to say, across the relevant group managers responsible for those, and we'll be rolling through this committee with regards to presenting to you our understanding of that risk and how we are managing said risk on your behalf. And just lastly, just as a reminder, this is the consequence table. I can't remember the date of the workshop that we held with the councillors, but it might have been within the last year. But this is a reflection of, I think, the consequence table that may have fallen out of that as well. But I think this is something as well that the chair is wishing to talk about a couple of items on as well.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. So I think like the workshop, the output of that workshop was the sort of 11 key risk categories that were in the table presented previously. This table, consequence table, sits within the risk framework and risk policy, and I'm just keen that there's a understanding and buy-in to that in terms of what's considered severe, major, moderate, minor and insignificant risks. So, because that is a key framework that management use in terms of their assessment of risks and the reporting that comes back to this committee. So, for example, the easiest one to get is to see is the numbers in terms of the financial assessment of what would be a severe risk versus an insignificant, and sort of as that cascades down. And so just really want to ensure that, again, the committee has seen that, understands that, and that's effectively what management are working to. And I guess the other point I picked up from your presentation or commentary, Thomas, and the CE made, the comment is, significant changes in the organisation, new management team bringing on board Infracore, so a lot of changes. So that is resulting in a bit of not change in focus, but a bit of a reset in terms of the risk system. I don't know if you want to really briefly comment on that, Andrew, and I guess we'll see more of that potentially next time. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And just briefly, yes, if you go back a couple of slides and you see the numbers of risks in different areas, I think it's just important that we say expect that to change as the new GMs looking over these portfolios come to grips with what's been entered in the past and do an update of those risks going forward. Yeah, there's a lot of change going on in the organisation at the moment. And actually, when I look forward over the next year, there's still quite a significant more to come just out of the drive from the changes I'm bringing.
Okay, no, thanks, Andrew. Questions from the committee of either Thomas or responding to CE? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. Just drilling down a little bit, if I may, the emergency management business continuity planning. It's showing as a medium and it's improving. I just wonder what if we could have a little bit of a discussion on or highlight what exactly we're exposed to in that medium risk in terms of continuity.
Yeah, I think thank you to the Chair. I think this is the sort of question that we don't have the material here to socialise with you, but over time that's what we'd expect to see. So to be able to delve into those risk categories and say, well, what exactly is going on here, and that might form a bit of a managed approach through the subsequent audit and risk committees, where we look through category by category, maybe based on what the committee deems to be the areas you want to look at first, and then explore those risks. What you're seeing is rolled up category risks, and it's very hard to have a detailed conversation about them at this level. You need to look at the specific underlying risks.
Okay. Thank you, I think.
Stuart, you're poised for a question.
Yeah, look, thanks for that question, Councillor Brown, because I think it cuts to the heart of, I think, what Mike and I were trying to achieve when we set up this kind of the purpose of what this might look like, a skeleton like this, and compliments. This is going a long, long way as something that I would feel comfortable being a member of an audit and risk committee to see, because it's big picture, looking at the way the wind's blowing, where the direction of the wind's potentially going, and what the consequence of that potential wind might be. Yes, it's not granular, which is what you've had in the past. It's more of a taste. But the kind of question that Councillor Brown gave is exactly what I intend to be the sort of committee input, where they're seeing some big picture, maybe trends, understanding what's behind it. And I know that with all the work that's going on and that Andrew and the team are doing, and that they are understanding that there will be, for these categories, we think, the senior manager will be on that spike of understanding. What's comprising that? We're talking material. So that Councillor Brown's questions can be answered. Where they say it might not be at this particular meeting, but it can become an action item that, oh look, I'm just trying to get my head around the sense of direction in relation to emergency management, continuity planning. And it's going to be an easier and less onerous task for management to be able to provide those ground feelings. We're not looking for deep dive reports. It's about, it's going to be these items, and we're working on them, but they're the ones that are flaring this risk up into the heat map. So I just say, personally, I'm really delighted to see the progress that Andrew and the team have made on this whole area of enterprise risk and metrics and monitoring. Really delighted. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. The other matter in the report is just the discussion point around IT and cyber. At the moment, they're bundled together in terms of one of the key 11s, and so the discussion point is around whether or not we split cyber out. I mean, personally, I would be very supportive of that. Just read a paper that came out of the IOD yesterday around the importance, the ongoing importance for governance boards to really have a strong focus on cyber risks and how cyber risks are being managed. So take direction from others, but I would certainly be really key that cyber versus IT systems are separated, and so at some point in time we can have a deep dive into particularly the cyber risk, how those have been mitigated and managed in the organisations. Stuart?
Through the Chair, if I could just make one last comment on a go-forward basis. Would anticipate this, what you're seeing is it's dynamic. And it will be dynamic, and it'll be especially this year when the new incoming council is facing a very, very big structural change. I'm thinking of in terms of the three waters, or local water done well, because that's going to change the face of this for council. And also, it'll be the incoming council that will be largely looking at that consequence table and assessing what the council feels are material risks that they're wanting to, there'll be risks that you're prepared to take. There'll be risks that you're not prepared to take. And that's and that's kind of like the first workshop, or some of the first workshops that incoming councils will do, will be to look at that ERM framework settings, the consequence table. But at least what we've got here now is a really great starting point.
Thanks, Stuart. Can I just go back to the cyber, just the comment in terms of splitting cyber out? So at the moment it's bundled with IT. Can I just get nods or lack of nods around the table that you support that?
Well, certainly, through you, Chair, I'd certainly support it. It makes sense. If we're going to end up on the front page of the paper, it's going to be around a cyber security leak.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Brown. Other comments? If that's the case, then we'll take it as there's support from around the committee that we will split cyber security as a separate risk category. So in that regard, can I have a mover and a second? The committee notes the updates, key risks, risk trends and new action plans. And the committee reviews the two scenarios for IT and cyber security risk categorisation, provide guidance on the preferred approach going forward, that guidance being to show cyber separately. Moved by Mayor Tapsall, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Confirmed. Thank you. Okay, so we're now on to 7.4, which is Treasury Update, which is page 54 of our agenda, and invite David to introduce the report. Oh, and that sorry, can I have a mover and second that the report Treasury Update January 25 be received? Moved by Councillor Kai Fong, seconded by Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. David.
Just to cover off this, I'll take the report largely as read, but there's a few things I'd like to draw your attention to. In the executive summary, you'll see that our debt at the end of January was $475 million. That's our gross debt. Our cash on hand was $42 million, which includes $26 million of pre-funding for a loan that is going to mature in the middle of April. So we have a $26 million term deposit that we will be using to repay one of our loans in the middle of next month. Also, just noting that our credit rating there of AA- was just recently reaffirmed with Fitch. So we went through the annual review process about a month or two ago, and that report has come through, and we have been held at AA- with a stable outlook. So we're holding that stable credit rating. Further on into the report, I guess what does stand out is that we are still in breach of one of our counterparty limits, and that is because when Council went out to market to place some swaps in November last year, we by virtue of it being our first swaps in 11 years, we only had one, and putting swaps in place with one bank meant that we were by default in breach of our counterparty limits. That will correct when that loan is repaid and the term deposit matures in the middle of April, and ongoing we will be within counterparty limits. Look, I'm happy to take questions on the report or on the attachment there, which includes the PwC reporting framework on our Treasury positions.
Thanks, David. Stuart.
Thanks, David. Really good. Thank you very much. The report for me it makes tons of sense, and I can see and visualise where Council's Treasury positions are and where they're looking, where they're likely to lead. I just had one question in terms of our liquidity policy and our and we look at liquidity on a go forward basis, and at the moment we're 113%, which is above our 110 minimum. When the pre-funding deposit essentially is utilised to repay the debt that it is pre-funding, in the next couple of months, what's that position likely to look like going forward? Do we have enough, have we got enough capacity in the, I think it's the 15 million undrawn facility to keep our 10% buffer? That's my main question, just on a go-forward basis. How are we looking over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 months?
Through the chair, if you on the attachment on page 60, you'll see there's a tick with the liquidity risk showing compliant until April 2025. If you look at the calculation basis behind that, we have a standby facility with the BNZ which will mature in April, that we are in the process of renegotiating. When we set that renegotiation and the pricing with BNZ, that will be set at a level to ensure that we will be well above our liquidity minimums and within best practice with our Treasury policy and with the preferences of the LGFA, and that will be. You'll see that coming through in the next Audit and Risk Committee with the reporting pack.
Sorry, just a point of clarification on that. The facility with the bank is maturing this April.
Correct.
Okay.
But it's been renegotiated, that's what I'm hearing, yeah?
It is at the moment, but at what? So, okay. I'm just thinking in terms of continuity. In hindsight, it'd be good to have refinanced that earlier.
But we are at a position where we are advanced in the discussion with BNZ, and we will be bringing something forward for a signature with the Chief Executive shortly to maintain that continuity.
Can you tell me what the new maturity on that facility is going to be, please?
Usually when we negotiate our committed facilities, we try and negotiate at least a 3-year term.
This will be a new 3-year. Okay.
Correct.
Thanks very much.
Are there any other questions for David? If not, and so David, PwC, we get them along to this committee once a year. We'll do that at our next meeting. I think it's really useful for the committee to hear direct from PwC. That's okay, yeah?
Sure, I'll reach out to Alex and make sure he's available.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks, David. Okay, so we're now on to Where are we at? So item 7.5, which is the annual report review. It's on page 65. So can I ask for a mover and a seconder that the annual report review management response recommendations be received? Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, as confirmed. I think, David, just having sat down, I think you're back up. So this is just a procedural thing. So we previously saw the report from Craig Fisher, a number of recommendations, and this is just David coming back and closing the loop, and the fact that we've had such a good result for the last audit clearly shows that a number of the items have been implemented. But David, over to you. Thank you.
So at the conclusion of the adoption of the 2023 annual report, the Audit and Risk Committee recommended an independent review take place over the processes of the previous two annual reports, which came through with the Craig Fisher report. That report made 21 recommendations that staff have received and are in the process of implementing with some were already in play through the successful adoption of the 2024 annual report, and a number, I guess the residual, are still being implemented for the timing of the 2025 annual report. You'll see under each recommendation, staff have a response as to where we're at in that process, but I'm happy to take questions on the report or the responses that we have to those recommendations.
Thanks, David. Are there questions for David? David, I get a sense reading the responses that either have been implemented or are being implemented, and effectively is pretty much confidence by the time we get to the end of the year, we'll have ticked everything off, so there's no barriers in the way of getting these things sorted, yeah?
That's correct.
Which is a credit to you and your team, so thank you in terms of the positivity, in terms of approaching this. No, if there are no other questions, then we can move, thanks David, we can move to item 7.6, a mover and seconder that the report annual plan 25-26 process be received, moved by Councillor Barker, seconded by Mayor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, thank you. Is Thomas talking to this? It's on page 70.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to just take any questions from the report that is read. Just cognizant that 4 of the members have gone through the process, but I appreciate the independents may want to ask some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Yeah, obviously councillors will be well involved with the process. Just my question, just around a key risk around timelines. That risk has been managed at this point in time. We're on track in terms of the adoption of the annual plan?
Yep, we're on track to, we had the councillors earlier this month at one of the committees approve the consultation topics. The consultation document has been completed and circulated, and tomorrow in council we'll be asking the councillors to formally approve the consultation document for release to be out for consultation for the majority of April.
Thank you, Thomas. Any other questions for Thomas? Stuart?
It's more just, and forgive me if it's a dumb question, it's in terms of the annual report that you're finalising, or the draft annual report, the draft annual plan that is there a component of it that is considering the 3 waters, or is that something that's going to come through in future reports once the submissions have been made, I think in September, and then the government comes back to tell us what we're all going to do? I'm not quite sure how they look, or if it looks any different this time.
Yeah, thank you to you, the Chair. I might answer that. So, Local Water Done Well is separate legislation than the Local Government Act and has different requirements for consultation. However, for the interests of the community, we are consulting on those 2 documents at the same time. The decision-making following the consultation could have divergent timelines. So the annual plan obviously only covers until 1 July next year.
Yep.
And the local water Dunwell water services delivery plan covers 10 years and needs to be submitted by the 2nd of September, whereas the annual plan needs to be confirmed by the end of June this year. So there isn't a significant overlap or intersection between those two documents, and so that the timelines for decision making on those two will be separate from each other.
I guess where I was coming from on this was that your submission in September is going to be indicating your preference for the options.
Correct.
And is this a draft annual plan going to be assuming that option?
Yes, they'll be consistent. The annual plan is consistent with the proposed preferred option.
Right. Great.
Which is consistent with our long-term plan.
Okay.
I think to help, we don't anticipate any change to the year 2 annual LTP, but it's very likely, subject to a decision in September and where council goes, that any changes that you may expect to see as a result of a decision, depending on which way it goes, would probably be more strongly reflected in the year 3 of the LTP, which will be the following annual plan. But at this point, I think, as the Chief Executive has said, no impact on year 2, and it's in line with what we're planning to consult on.
Can I assume, and maybe a completely wrong assumption, that you're going to be continuing, it's going to be the sort of business as usual?
Through you, Chair. So I wouldn't use business as usual as a term, because the government's been very clear that there is no such thing as business as usual. However, the delivery model of keeping it ring-fenced as a standalone council business unit is the proposed model for the period of the annual plan, and therefore they're consistent.
Thank you. It's brilliant.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll take this item. Thank you, Thomas. At this stage, then, we're moving into public excluded. There are 4 items for consideration in the public excluded session. The items and their reasons are to not prejudice or disadvantage negotiations and maintain legal professional privilege. So, in consideration of that, has been given to the public interest in these matters, and the officer's advice is that we, for the above reasons, confidentially outweigh the public interest. In that regard, can I have a mover and a seconder that the Audit and Risk Committee resolves to exclude the public on the grounds contained in Section 48(1) of the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act? Moved by Councillor Kaifong, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. So we are now moving into public excluded. I think we just have to pause while we pull the plug out for live stream.